item. Now, we've got the land use recovery plan. It's again the committee of the whole, and it's the exemplar housing projects. Now, I'm not sure whether we've got to a point where people want to, I think people, does anyone want to move the recommendation that's in front of us? Because I know that colleagues want to move amendments, so you'll move it. Pauline Cotter moving. Anyone want to second the motion as it stands? Glenn Livingston. So let's open it up for questions. I know that Phil Clearwater has an amendment that he'd like to move. I wonder whether you want to put the amendment on the table before we have questions?
Sorry.
Yep.
I don't know that there is the, going back to the previous matter, that we actually adopted the report.
Yes, we did. I just did it in the wrong order. Yeah, we adopted the report before we voted on the recommendation. That was the key part of the report. That was my fault. Phil, do you want to put that on the table now?
Look, I do, and it's basically too though that if, for example, we go wider than what is written in this report, and look at the possibility of land swap in the future, that's something perhaps though that we should discuss in public excluded.
Right.
But basically, I think I understand there is potential to look at this whole exemplar process differently, and that we shouldn't be. There is a timeline for us, and it may be though that instead, and I can check with staff the date for that. But it may be that we can still support some of the options that have been presented to us previously in previous reports as part of the exemplar, and though with, for example, the site like Brown Village, that in fact we look at the possibility of that being part of a land swap arrangement.
Yeah, but let me just ask, what is the deadline date for nominating the 2 sites for the exemplar projects?
The 8th of June, isn't it?
If I can just read from the alert, Madam Chair, it says, decision on whether the proposal is approved as an exemplar within 6 months of gazettal of the recovery plan. The recovery plan was gazetted on the 6th of December, so therefore 6 months falls on the 6th of June. So a month away, basically, less than a month.
So can I ask your staff then too, if in fact a land swap is a distinct possibility, which we'd have to discuss later, can some of the previous options, like for example, I think it's Cole Street, but certainly Kerry Place, could they be considered today, or should we consider them at a later date?
The Loop action talks about 2 council social housing exemplars, and clearly with the time frame on the action, ideally we'd have a decision about which 2 will be the council social housing exemplars in time for that time frame to be met.
Well, I mean, it's what I'm hearing, because I wasn't sure of the deadline date, and I wonder whether we could refer this paper, or let it lie on the table is what you do, or whatever, or refer it to the June Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole, which I've just checked is the day before we have to notify, for a final decision on the exemplar project. The reason is that there's been correspondence that's come in which has indicated noise and vehicle emissions as problematic with that site, and although we can certainly address both of those issues in terms of the structure of the buildings, you can't for the amenity outside. So I think that we need to have a little bit more of a think about the site, and whether there are other options, whether we could do some land swap as the councillor suggested, and which may mean that we'll choose one of the other sites as the exemplar project, so that we can at least comply with our obligation to get the 2 sites notified by the 6th of June, if you see what I mean. So that's what we're exploring at the moment.
So it's probably helpful for me just to explain the process to get here. So the Housing Committee, you might recall, identified and selected the two exemplars, and this report is simply taking that decision from the Housing Committee and then subsequently Council and assessing those two sites against the exemplar criteria. So this the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole was not asked to necessarily select the sites. It was asked to, acknowledge the resolutions. To endorse the projects and note that there are further reports to come to provide information and assess the missing components from the exemplar processes from the Housing Committee decision for this. Now, I know that sounds complicated, but that's how we had to manage it in terms of the Housing Committee making the recommendation and then the exemplar assessment. But
we chose two, and there's one of them that some of us are having second thoughts about.
That's right, but and perhaps the Earthquake Recovery Committee has the delegated authority to change one of those sites. I'm just questioning what the process would be.
No, that's what I'm asking, because will that be sufficient time for the notification? Because, I mean, a number of us, are concerned about the aspects of noise and vehicle emissions that we didn't have factored into our original decision. And the second is the question of other options that might arise from an alternative use for the site itself.
So the housing, I guess to follow the process that has occurred already, the Housing Committee would need to make a recommendation around an alternative
this
site.
went to the Canterbury, this went to the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole.
That's right.
And we chose the two sites.
No.
Yes. We had another option on the table and we chose two of them. In fact, we had a very close vote on it. And a debate for an hour and a half on it.
Can I just say for clarification, my clear recollection is that the Housing Committee weren't able to make a decision.
That's right.
So it went to the Committee of the Whole.
And we did make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor.
Which some of us, well, actually I made the right decision then, but I voted against Brougham Street. But there are people who think that we should proceed with Brougham Street. There are people who now think that they shouldn't proceed with Brougham Street. So how do we deal with that and the time frame that we've got? Because it may well be that it would be better to endorse the other site
Correct.
as the exemplar, but it's not here in the paper, which is why I'm trying to find a way of resolving it. Or should we just refer it to the next council meeting?
I'm wondering if the
I think next council meeting's on the 22nd.
No, not the next one, the non-extraordinary one, the next ordinary council meeting. The 22nd of May?
May.
Yep.
Because I'm not sure if you refer it to the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the
it's
Whole.
too late.
It's too late.
Yep, okay. So how do we... Can we just... Do we need to move a resolution to let it lie on the table, or do we just agree to?
Well, if you want to amend an earlier decision which you've already made about choosing your preferred second, then there'll need to be a rescinding or an amending report on the 22nd of May meeting.
Okay, so, but no, because we made a decision that was a decision of the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole.
When that came to council?
Yeah, but it's here now, and we haven't made a decision, so we can reverse it. Yeah. So it does actually mean that the paper needs to, well. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to say that we want the paper to come back to council on the 22nd of May with all of the original options included within the paper. So we want to go back to where we were with the that when it came to the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole. So we want that back on the table. And we also want it to deal with noise and vehicle emissions.
That's your view, Mayor, it's not mine.
No.
What?
Okay. I mean, we have a motion on the table, so so perhaps I'll foreshadow a motion, and Councillor Clearwater. Yep. No. Well, I'll second to you. So we'll foreshadow a motion, which is that the report on this. Sorry, help me with some wording.
That the report be referred to the 22nd of May meeting.
That the report be referred to the 22nd of May meeting with additional information provided on the Brougham Street site, and with the other options included in the report. Yep.
I'm just thinking about the needing to have an assessment around the site and then an assessment around the exemplar. So I think that it may be one report, but there may have to be two components to it, and John may need to do an assessment from an exemplar perspective on all of the sites, so that you can make that decision on the 22nd of May.
There was only 2 others that were raised.
Yep.
Yeah, and we've selected. Yeah.
Ask a process question, please.
Yeah, I've just foreshadowed a motion, so we'll now deal with your motion.
Okay, if I may just ask a process, because it seems to me this actually wouldn't be an amendment.
No, it's not an amendment, sorry, it's a foreshadowed motion.
Okay.
And it's moved by Councillor Clearwater, seconded by me. Sorry?
If you're going to change Brougham Street, so noting that if the
Very careful about that. So they'll have to, in fact, it'll have to be 2 reports, because I have to make a decision on the site. I have to make a decision rather than one report. John, it's not your job. It's not your job to do stuff. It's back with the housing guys. It's 2 reports.
Perhaps you can help us out on the sequence of events. It doesn't, I mean, it seems as if the council made a resolution on the Brougham Street site.
That was my recollection, because it came from the Housing Committee to council, I have to say, is my recollection.
So why is it in the Earthquake Recovery Committee of the Whole report?
Because there's two council has 2 hats in this process. One is council as social housing provider, and then the other is council as LERP action decision maker and an enabler. So the first process was around the site and came through the Housing Committee, and the decision before you today is the second hat around LERP action decision maker and enabler.
Okay, so the debate that I'm thinking back to was a debate that occurred at council. Okay, so that means that the foreshadowed motion will also have to deal with rescinding the previous decision, but that's okay. We'll deal with that when we get to it. So let's go back up and deal with the original motion. And we've got that moved by Councillor Cotter, Councillor Livingston. Are there any questions of staff on that? Yanni?
I just kind of want to understand, because I think we're getting really confused about what exemplar projects are or aren't. And so my understanding, and I'd just like staff to comment if this is the correct interpretation or not, is that an exemplar project can be quite wide-ranging. There's wide range of things that we could do. So it's not just about putting back social housing where social housing currently is. It's actually about looking at what is the mixed use opportunities, what is looking at sustainable design, environmental design, best practice urban design. I presume that that would include things like mitigating noise, direction or orientation of development, possibly looking at some community space, etc., etc. So I think I just want to kind of understand, if we approve Brown Village as an exemplar, are we just putting back social housing where social housing is, or are we open to doing creative things with the land that the exemplar would enable us to do?
Well, to some degree, I mean, the criteria are set out there: high quality, safe, accessible, well built. Section 2.4 sets out the 7 criteria, and so the things that you've mentioned, Councillor Johansson, are all I would judge within those 7 criteria.
Came back, for example, one of the concerns that people have had is we're putting too much social housing into this area along Brougham Street, and so if it came back, could it say, well, actually you would only use this much land for housing and you might do this much for some sort of community facility, or I don't know, retail or commercial? I mean, is that sort of, does it have the width to be able to kind of make those sorts of calls?
Probably not the comments that you made around community facilities and retail or other activities. No, the one component that we have is in relation to innovation within the housing market and thinking about that kind of mixed use or that mixed tenure.
Just to confirm, Madam Chair, that in the LURP, under the LURP exemplar, it talks about this being to promote affordable housing. So that's the overall philosophy of what this is trying to achieve.
If there was a proposal put to council that this land where the Brougham Street Village is could be swapped for land on the other side of town, on Beeley Avenue, for example, just plucking a street out of the air, could it be possible to undertake the development in that area, an area that doesn't have a lot of our social housing, and in fact quite close to where we've just lost some community housing, actually social housing, would it be possible to think of an opportunity like that as being, potentially preferential to developing this site for housing, given some of the constraints?
Without specifics, that's quite a difficult question to answer. But assuming that the site met the or had opportunities to meet the criteria, then that to some degree that decision and choice is yours.
Mm.
Given that we have to create 2 exemplars in the LURP, do we absolutely have to name where the second one is?
Yes, because it makes it very hard to undertake the assessment and in terms of the action, report and indicate that progress is being made towards actually achieving that affordable housing and achieving those criteria.
So just as a minor problem, don't we have an issue in that our social housing land at the moment is listed as a strategic asset, which without public consultation we can't do any development that involves the private sector owning some of that land. Yeah. So prior to us going out to consultation on that issue, which we will hopefully start after next Monday, we can't actually, with what's left in the housing account, knowing what's currently there, do any of these things anyway. So aren't they slightly economically theoretical without that having been passed by the public?
And when John has undertaken the assessment, he's noted that there are some areas where there is insufficient information to make a full assessment, and that diversity and affordability. You'll note further information on design and competition, further information on mix of affordability. So he's acknowledged that there is insufficient information to make that assessment as firmly as required, which is why he's noted the second recommendation that further reports are needed.
So insufficient information, but also insufficient money.
Yep. Any more questions? Yep, Phil.
I just wanted to clarify first that were you really saying before that if Brougham Street was an exemplar project, that in fact a land swap could be part of that, or were you not?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't saying.
Okay.
I wasn't saying that. What I was saying was that to make the assessment, 2 sites are needed.
What I'm concerned about is in this recommendation, Brougham, and I don't think council's got any problem with Andrews Crescent being an exemplar project, but with Brougham Village, a strong candidate for exemplar status, when the original report, which the Housing Committee received, covered issues like poor ground conditions, time delay, cost implications, and we haven't got any. I know we haven't got any for Andrews Crescent either. Also, the high density already representation of social and affordable housing on one street, and the adverse effects on the state highway, and the pollution, the air pollution and the noise pollution have been referred to. So can you sort of help me understand how, in fact, given those disadvantages, how, in fact, it's a strong candidate to be an exemplar?
So council made the decision on the site, and this assessment has been made on the basis of applying the exemplar criteria to Brougham Street, but acknowledging that there is still further information required to make a full assessment. This report is not a full assessment, but on the criteria that John has been able to assess, he has identified that it is a strong candidate. And if I recall back to the Housing Committee debate, because I was there for that debate, the Housing Committee was pretty evenly tied really on what actually was the best second exemplar.
Pauline?
Sorry, Don, do you want to?
Oh. If I may add to that, yes. One of the we're looking at both the outcome at the end of the exemplar process, what the actual product is that is available for future tenants or owners or what have you. But one of the aims of the exemplar process is innovation, and that includes technical innovation, and may look at new designs and techniques to overcome some of the technical issues that may be associated with, for example, land remediation for housing development.
Who would pay for that? Do we know?
Well, that would be part of the process of developing the design for the site.
Or a potential builder or partner. Thanks, John.
Yes.
So if I may.
Yeah, Pauline, sorry.
So Andrews Crescent, which I think we've all pretty much agreed upon, there doesn't seem to be any dissent over that one, currently has 36 bed sit units. How many are we proposing to intensify that by, up to how many? Just rough ballpark. Around 100.
I don't. Andrews Crescent isn't quite. Oh, it is.
Andrews Crescent.
Yes.
It will depend on the final design, but it's over 100 new residential units potentially.
Right, and the proposed funding of that? How do we...
So that's within the social housing, and I'm afraid we don't have any of our social housing colleagues here, so you're asking us questions that rightly sit with...
I could answer. The partners are coming back with funding options. That's part of the whole RFP process.
Okay, so my further question is, does that same process apply to Brougham, where we'll be putting it out to partners to come back with proposals which will include funding of the project?
Again, we're not close enough to those projects. We're not the project leaders or the drivers of those. One assumes that we are following consistent process, but I wouldn't like to say that that is the firm answer on that.
Well,
we will have to come back to you.
It does seem to be, comes up quite often from fellow councillors that the council will be bearing the cost of the Brougham development and we can't afford it. But whereas and you can help me, Glenn, I was of the belief that we won't be paying for this, that we have partners, that we're putting it out for requests for proposals.
Well, they'll have to come back with the different options and whether that involves us and to what degree.
Okay.
Very nice of you to have a little chat amongst yourselves.
Oh, sorry, Pauline asked me. Sorry, I didn't mean...
Through you, Leanne, sorry, but it's just because the staff were unable to clarify that, and I think it's quite a key point here, because the funding has come up as an adverse
yeah, I think the point that's been made, though, is in order to engage, sort of wider partners in anything that might include the land, has got an issue. But anyway, Glenn?
Thank you. If I could just ask a question about one of the criteria with the loop over these exemplar projects is diversity. And what I want to ask is a question that kind of reflects a bit of a concern I'm picking up, which I think is over the previous built form or kind of typology of social housing we've had in the city and throughout, well, any part of the world actually, that really serves to stand out and becomes kind of characterised by the local community. So my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that this kind of serves to introduce a more subtle approach which reflects a change in thinking where actually you cannot necessarily tell or differentiate between those who are social housing tenants or otherwise in any given neighbourhood, whether it's here or... Have I got that right? It talks about diversity. So it's a lessening, it's more heterogeneity rather than the whole sort of sameness that has...
You're not allowed to use words like that. I've just ruled them out of order. Just say sameness. I know. You're doing a very good job.
I'll let John answer that.
So perhaps it would just, at this point, just to outline the steps for the 2 exemplars beyond this. One of those steps involves the design being critiqued and analysed by the Urban Design Panel. One of those steps is, again, the same process, but for the LERP partners. And finally, also the Canterbury Sustainable Homes Working Party as well. I think your particular point probably sits with the Urban Design Panel to thoroughly assess that particular aspect, and that is one of the matters which they would consider in their analysis of the schemes.
Phil and then Vicky.
Look, this is part of a possible future process. For example, if in the future the council does look at a land swap, we need to do a whole consultation process. Could that be included in a consultation process, that in fact council make land exchanges with other property owners as part of the consultation? I'm just wanting to make sure we get that part right.
The one on the 12th that we just...
Yes, yeah.
It has to be built. Can I just raise a... Sorry.
I want to check with the staff that could be part of the consultation.
I will say potentially. I feel like I've only got part of the information, so I'm struggling to actually give you really sound advice.
Yeah, no, and we wouldn't expect you to advise on that, but the point is that I think that there is a consultation due to commence if a certain paper goes through next week.
Yes.
And if that occurs, then I think the sense is that it could actually include reference to land swapping as part of the whole process.
And land being used in public-private partnerships as well. Can I just raise a really basic point about these exemplars? If you assume 100 extra houses or 100 houses, I think it was 130 at Andrews Crescent actually, was it? Up to. Okay, let's assume 100 houses at 100 units at Andrews Crescent with a build cost of $250,000 per unit. I'm just making that figure up, but it was similar to some of the ones that were mentioned in the housing report. We're looking at around 25 million. If we're looking at, say, 200 on the Brougham Street site, we're looking at, say, 50 million. We actually don't have that money in the housing budget. So that creates a serious problem in terms of committing to something that other parties may see as a total commitment ahead of a public consultation process which allows us to do this by way of public-private partnership, so it's not our money that's building those houses, simply because we don't have that money in the Housing Reserve Fund. That's the problem I have. It's not a design problem. It's just really basic. We don't have the money. So how do we commit to something that as yet we don't have public approval to do?
I don't know that that's part of the brief that council staff have got here at this moment. I really think
it's not a design problem.
I think that the issue is that we have an obligation to go back to actually provide advice as to exemplar housing projects. Some of the council wish to proceed with the decision that was already made. Others want to review the Brian Village. So let's just deal with it in that light. And did you have another question? Okay, well, let's just open the resolution up for debate. Phil?
Well, look, I think through the questions I've made the points that I want to make, but look, I just want to see the best outcome that we can get for both social and affordable housing. And it has to work. It has to be, and it also has to be affordable. And I think we should take that factor and the other factors into account. And so it just seems to me that to go wider, so we need to go wider. And so I'm actually not going to support the current recommendations.
Pauline?
Thank you. Look, I know it's contentious, but in actual fact, it's not a bad location in my view, and it's a challenge that we do mitigate the flaws with it. We can create a buffer zone. There's all sorts of things we can do with design. And I think that in the table here, it says the site is zoned for residential, allows for medium and high density development, a number of examples in the area. There are no constraints on the development. It's close to a pocket park. It's 550 metres from Sydenham Park, Waltham Park, the Colombo Street shops. There are bus routes along. There's a school close by. It has a lot of advantages. Also close to Polytech. You can walk into town. So I would like to see this progress because mainly of the time factor. We've got it here and now. We have a housing crisis. This is a big site. We can get a lot of dwellings on here. And if, as a result of the consultation, we may be able to partner still within that site, it has options once we get that consultation through. So I'm still in support of this because it means we can get cracking. And I think we do have a housing crisis. We have to do something. And because of the size of the site, we have an opportunity to get some roofs over people's heads and some good ones, some nice ones, energy efficient, well designed. And I think this is a challenge and an opportunity. So I'll be supporting it.
Glenn and then Paul.
Thank you. I still support